those planets that go beyond Saturn are higher octaves of other inner planets. And so it makes
Mm.
that as our consciousness expands and our spirit expands, now we can kind of communicate more with those higher octaves.
Oh, that's cool. And you're saying that, and I'm like hearing solfeggios in my mind. And I
It's
know
all
somebody.
related.
Hey, everybody, it's Tanya here. I'm so excited to share an excerpt from my new podcast called Women Working with Light. It is a series of interviews with women from around the world who are doing what they love in service to themselves and to others. Today, I'm sharing an excerpt from a great interview I had with a friend of mine, Wendy Wright of Light Always Wins. In this particular moment, we were talking about astrology and the new ideas and concepts that are available to us now in 2022.
I find that as a newcomer to it, because astrology is huge in the last 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
And I read these memes and stuff, and I think they're funny, but then half the time I'm like, I don't know. WTF, man? Like, what is this about? Moon in Leo, sun sign. I'm like, I don't know what any of that stuff is.
Yeah.
So
But like,
I
especially for somebody who's kind of new to looking within, I think that it helps to have somebody sort of affirm some things about you that you know, but maybe you didn't necessarily really think about them before.
I always found that the stereotypes of the astrology was so much BS that I was like, it means nothing to me because Libras were always doing things a very particular way and Scorpios were always doing things a particular way. Like, not every Scorpio is going to be, like the dragon lady who's
Yeah.
out to sex up everybody and mess up their life and hold a grudge and
Right.
have long nails and wear black, and not every Libra is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of lost my interest. But I now things are very different. There's much more, there's depth now where before it was more
Yes.
stereotype.
Yeah. And each sign has their light and shadow, each symbol, you know what I mean? And I feel like certain ones do get picked on more sometimes. And that's just like I don't know, just pop astrology kind of thing. But
Yeah.
when you get into like what it actually is, and the other thing is, like you said, not all Scorpios are like this, and it's absolutely true because our chart has so many, all the planets affect us and they're all in different places. So even if you're a Scorpio sun, you might have 3 planets over in Capricorn or something, and maybe you actually feel way more Capricorn energy because of that. So it's not as cut and dry as the horoscopes in the paper. There's
Yeah.
way more to it. So it's really cool when you get a legit like birth chart reading. It's very different.
Well, that was what I wanted to do years ago. And it was a guy that was, there was a spiritual woman called Crystal Hughes. She was a progenitor to and she was working with a guy who did, I want to say Ayurvedic, but that's not the right word. It's an Indian astrology, but he was like a
Oh,
master of it.
Vedic astrology.
Thank you, Vedic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was like, that's all he did his whole life, like since
Cool.
he was a teenager trained. So I was so excited. I was like, maybe finally I'll get something more than this, pop stuff. And he said he couldn't do it because I didn't have the actual time.
Well, I can still look at your chart and tell a lot without the time,
It is
but
fascinating. Okay, so here's a question I've been dying to ask someone who's into astrology.
yeah.
Um, because this goes back to my science training. And this is a very 3D question, which is the influence of the gravitational pulls and the spatial analysis of the solar system, which has shifted so much since a lot of these teachings came about. So I don't know how far astrology goes back, 3,000 years.
It goes way back, and I think that I mean, it's different in all different cultures. There's Chinese astrology, there's Vedic astrology. So all of these things have room for interpretation. Um, and they had that debate of whether the Earth was the center of the solar system or the sun, which I don't know, that might have changed astrology a little bit when they decided to change that up. And you can definitely look at charts differently. Like the way we look at an astrology chart, or the way I look at it, and a lot of astrologers look at it, is that Earth is sort of like you're observing all the planets from Earth. But you can
Right.
also set up programs to observe all the planets from the sun. I think that would
Oh,
be heliocentric, but most people don't do it that way because we're on Earth. So the alignments are affecting us here, not on the sun, you know?
unless you're doing Central Sun time, which is a whole other ball of wax.
And so, one thing that I think is fascinating that I went over in my mystery school class, my first class, was how back when they talked about alchemy, they only considered out to Saturn. But
Oh,
as we kept discovering more planets further out, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, every
yeah.
time that happens, the consciousness of the collective expands. So, in my sort of idea of our journey through the planets, I also include out to Pluto. And I see it almost as like just a little bit of an expanded cosmology, if you will.
Mm,
And I think that that goes hand in hand with like what I was saying about how we're ascending, as people like to say, you know, like regaining some of our spirit. Those planets that go beyond Saturn are higher octaves of inner inner planets. And so it makes
mm.
that as our consciousness expands and our spirit expands, now we can kind of communicate more with those higher octaves.
Oh, that's cool. And you're saying that, and I'm like hearing solfeggios in my mind. And I
It's
know
all
somebody was
related.
sharing
Like you could
that.
look at the mathematics, and I bet you could line it
Yeah,
up with music, like all of it, you know?
yeah, yeah,
And that's what's incredible is like you could line it up with all the sacred geometry and it all overlaps.
yeah. It does, and that's why I'm always dumbfounded by people who have that separation, from themselves and the rest of the world, because it all has an underlying truth or thread or whatever word to
Mhm.
use that
Mhm.
you see again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
Whether it is Western definition of science or Eastern definition of science or what we call our spirituality or esoterics, or you see the same things again and again and again. So
Yep.
fascinating. Oh my God, I could do this for hours.
And we did, and we had such a great conversation. I hope you click over to the podcast for Women Working with Light at podcast.tanyakucey.com. The rest of this interview, as well as some other amazing women who are experts in their field doing what they love, lifting up themselves and everyone around them. Thanks so much for joining me. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, and share. It really does help get content out there to others that can use it, and you never know who might benefit from something you have to say. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.